Welcome to Frazier and Deeter's Culture of Compliance podcast series, where we discuss compliance as a competitive advantage in today's marketplace. I'm Sabrina Serafin, partner and national leader of Frazier and Deeter's process, risk, and governance practice. Today, we're getting an update regarding Brexit, the long-awaited departure of the UK from the European Union. Our guests today are Malcolm Joy, the leader of Frazier and Deeter's UK practice, and William Morrison, the Director of Client Services at Essentia Global Services. Essentia specializes in global indirect tax management, helping businesses manage their worldwide compliance and cost burden with respect to VAT and similar taxes. William and Malcolm, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Sabrina. Good to be here.
To set the stage for our U.S. audience, we thought it would be a good idea to have Malcolm give us a recap of the impact of Brexit.
Thanks, Sabrina. Yes, Britain was part of the European Union from the early 1970s, and it effectively gave us a single market for goods and services with no tariffs, no customs duties, and limited border checks within Europe. We also had free movement of labour and free movement of capital within the European Union. And our departure from the EU means we now need to re-establish rules for all the cross-border activity.
Now, as I recall, the vote for Brexit was in 2016, and there were several extensions during the negotiations, correct?
That's right. There were many, many rules which needed to be agreed, including rules around health regulation, food safety, competition, fishing rights, etc. And it proved to be a very drawn out and even quite acrimonious negotiation over the years. And technically, we actually left the European Union on 31st of January 2020, but there was a transition period agreed up until 31st of December 2020. It was only when the transition period ended that the old rules fell away. One of the most important areas where we are now seeing the change is in our VAT regime.
Of course, Malcolm, for our U.S. audience, they may not be familiar with VAT. Can you explain what VAT is and how does it differ from the United States tax system?
Yes, so VAT is a type of sales tax, but there are a number of key differences around how it operates. In particular, businesses that have to charge VAT are often able to recover some of the VAT on the costs that are incurred by them. I think some of the key differences we are going to see, though, as Britain has moved out of the European Union, are around how that VAT regime in Europe is applied and how we now have a separate VAT regime for the UK. Some of the main issues are going to be around registrations and accounting for the VAT, but hopefully it shouldn't be too much of an extra cost if businesses handle their affairs appropriately.
So since VAT is a key part of understanding the implications of Brexit, let me ask William some questions. William, can you tell us more about how Brexit is impacting companies with a presence in the UK?
Sure. The UK has, for a long time, been a first landing point for a lot of US companies that are looking to invest in Europe because of legal and language ties, has been seen as quite a good kind of base for European operations. So we deal with a lot of US companies that are now having to face the fact that their EU base is no longer in the EU and react to that in one way or another.
That's interesting.
I think there are two kind of levels of impact of Brexit. There are a lot of US service providers that have come into the UK, and there are a lot of US goods distributors or manufacturers. We've got limited time today, so I'm proposing to focus a little bit more on goods than on services. The simple reason for that is that the single market has never been a perfect creation and has never been as deep in services as it was in goods. There's never really been quite so much of a single market for services, and as a result, the impact of the UK leaving the single market in the service world has been much less severe. So this doesn't necessarily mean that if you're a service provider, you've got a free pass and nothing has changed. But most of the rules with respect to services, the fundamentals are still the same. It's only really for the goods providers that the landscape really has very dramatically shifted.
Okay.
The key thing, of course, for people moving goods between the UK and the EU, either direction, is that there's now a customs border in between. Up until 1st of January, you could just have a distribution point in the UK for Europe, load a truck and get driving, the same as you can have a distribution point in Atlanta and get driving for Florida. That's no longer the case. Goods have to face customs clearance in order to leave the EU, to leave the UK and enter the EU, or vice versa. And that has a number of tax implications. Probably the main ones in terms of, I could look at the main ones in terms of VAT and customs duty. On the customs duty side of things, customs duty is a bottom line cost at a border. You've got to pay it, and generally speaking, you don't get to claim it back. So somebody, either you're the supplier or the customer, is going to end up having to pay something for those goods when they're dutiable. That was a major issue in the UK because our economy is so intertwined with the rest of Europe that it would be akin these days to putting up customs border, I don't know, between Wisconsin and Minnesota. It would create a great deal of chaos. So we have a free trade agreement with the EU, which means that there's zero customs duties on UK originating goods in the EU, and zero customs duties on EU originating goods in the UK. So that's removed duty as a cost, but it does leave three problems. The first problem is, although you've got 0% duty, you've still got to submit your customs declarations. So the guy in the lorry still gets stopped and has to do his papers and things like that. And in the modern economy, where we've got a lot of, real-time deliveries and things like that, these delays at customs, even if they're not leading to any tax being paid, can be very critical things for people. The second thing is that it creates VAT implications. But the third thing is that the UK-EU Free Trade Agreement covers UK and EU originating goods. It doesn't cover non-originating goods. So a very common scenario up until now has been that, for instance, you have a US company that distributes US-made goods out of the UK into the EU. If you've got that going on right now, although we've got a free trade agreement, when the goods rock up at the EU border, they're not UK origin goods, even though they've just come from the UK. They're US origin goods. So the US origin duty rates apply, which means a lot of businesses distributing out of the EU face the challenge of unexpected duty costs as the goods move from the UK to the EU. So the challenge is a potential double duty cost. You've paid duty to get the goods from the US into the UK, but then you need to pay it again to get the goods from the UK into the EU.
Of course.
There are special reliefs that you can apply for and special suspensions in the UK. So to get rid of that, the UK duty end of that, if they're just passing through, but they're bureaucratic and they involve things like, special permissions and guarantees and things. So even if you make the bottom line cost go away, A, it adds to your admin cost, and B, you have to have it in mind you need to do it. Otherwise, the problem will come and bite you when you actually try and move the goods. So that was a quick look through the customs duty side of things. I think on the value-added tax side of things, obviously value-added tax is a consumption tax somewhat similar to the sales taxes that crop up in US states, and somewhat similar to what some states are trying to do at the moment in terms of making sure that there's a flat playing field for interstate trade and make sure that goods are taxed in where they're consumed. The EU has rules that specify that goods are taxed to VAT where they're consumed, or if they're shipped cross border, where they arrive. At the moment, when UK goods leave for the EU, they can be zero rated for VAT. There's no UK VAT problem because they're leaving the UK, so that's the end of our concerns with them. But upon arrival in the EU, there's not just duty to pay at the border, but there's VAT to pay at the border as well. A common point of friction now between suppliers and customers is, okay, who gets to pay that now? And this is driven generally speaking, by the delivery terms that are in contracts of supply. So there are international standard delivery terms with things like DDU, delivered duty unpaid, or DDP, delivered duty paid. Depending on which of those terms are applying, you can get different VAT outcomes. If, for instance, your UK base is supplying into customers in the EU on a DDP basis, delivered duty paid basis, they're responsible for being the importer at the EU end, as well as being the exporter from the UK. Not legally, anybody can be the importer, but actually commercially, because the DDP contract obliges them to do that. Unfortunately, the consequence of you being the importer in the destination country means that you have to pay local VAT, and you actually become registrable as a local VAT taxpayer, because after having cleared those goods for import in your own name, the subsequent transaction becomes a domestic transaction. So you almost take ownership of those goods in the local VAT system and become a local VAT taxpayer. So we're seeing a lot of US companies that are distributing out of the UK maybe entered into distribution delivery contracts with customers back in the day when there was a single market and nobody worried too much. You know what, delivered duty paid, delivered duty unpaid, doesn't matter. But if it's got that delivered duty paid in it now, it's got that kind of time bomb that all of a sudden there is a customs border now. You as a supplier are responsible for it, and therefore you have to VAT register locally. That can become a particular problem if you've got DDP contracts with a number of different EU countries, because unfortunately there's still no such thing as a single EU VAT registration. So if you're delivering DDP to 10 different countries in the EU, you suddenly become registrable for that in 10 different countries in the EU, which can pose quite a administrative problem.
I'm sure it does, William. What are some of the questions that companies with a UK presence should be asking themselves right now?
So I think the important thing is to be quite diagnostic on this and to really look at what are your product flows, perhaps go through a full list of your product flows, where goods are coming from if you're buying them, where they're going to if you're selling them, and what are the delivery terms, both that your suppliers have negotiated with you and that you have negotiated with your customers. And then for each product flow, it's possible to diagnose, okay, what is the impact of this customs border? Is there one at all? And if there is, and it's a negative one, then what can we do about it? And then from that, to start to distill out some action points to take corrective action. And I think I would reassure most businesses that Brexit's kind of not the end of the world. There's considerably more admin in some circumstances, and it makes some transactions more difficult. But generally speaking, there's a solution to these things. Most of the people who are getting in trouble at the moment and have their trucks stopped and their product rotting and things like that are mainly people who have not actually implemented that solution on a timely basis. I won't say that there's a magic formula for solving every problem, but most of these problems for most people are manageable with a little bit of preemption and thought.
Thank you so much, William and Malcolm. I appreciate you joining us today to help our audience better understand Brexit and the compliance ramifications.
Been my pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Sabrina.
And to our audience, thank you for listening to Frazier and Deeter's Culture of Compliance podcast. And please join us for our next episode as we continue to discuss transforming compliance requirements into investments in your business.
Thanks for listening to one of Frazier and Deeter's branded podcasts. To learn more, connect with us on LinkedIn or visit us at frazierdeeter.com and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.